In Greek mythology, there was once a man who cheated death. As punishment, he was sent to one of the hills of Tartarus and presented with a boulder. His punishment was to roll it all the way to the top of the hill, but there's a catch. The boulder was enchanted so that a few steps from the top, it would become so impossible to move that the man would have no choice but to give up and watch it roll all the way to the bottom, where he must start his task all over again, and again, and again, forever. His refusal to accept his death caused the gods to become so angry that they concocted a punishment so unique that the man's name became synonymous with unending labour with no hope of reward or respite. A man cheats death and is sentenced to carry a heavy weight up a steep hill for all eternity. A woman survives a car crash and is trapped in an alien world from which even death is not an escape. And a man watches his wife die and is forced to confront his actions. An inability to accept the inevitable, to take responsibility, to move on, an eternal punishment of unimaginable suffering. This video contains major spoilers for both Silent Hill 2 and Returnal. They're pretty much the entire way through, so if you don't want these brilliant games spoiled, I totally understand if you want to give this one a miss. Also, I cover some pretty dark topics in this one, so if you're sensitive to discussion about death, again, you might want to skip it entirely. There's also a section that covers sexual abuse, so keep an eye out for that warning if you'd like to skip that. Every one of the examples I'm going to mention today carry with them some form of grief. Sisyphus mourned, or more accurately, refused to mourn for his own death, and did everything he could to avoid it. In Returnal, Celine's driving force from the first moments of the game is that same refusal to accept things as they are. The game opens with her responding to a distress signal known only as White Shadow. She's advised to ignore it but cannot bring herself to simply move on, so she closes in and breaches through the atmosphere. Before she can even find her bearings, she gets lost in a storm and crash lands, becoming trapped on the planet of Atropos. Her ship, Helios, is completely wrecked, leaving her with no possible way to escape. She tries to send out a distress signal, but needs to reach higher ground for it to make it to Earth. She abandons her ship and explores the surrounding area. Fairly quickly, she finds what appears to be the body of another scout, and she rolls it over to check the name, only to see it's... After this, she also begins to find scout logs scattered around the area. All of them are recorded by her, but are saying things that she's never said.
Playing back now. Scout log. Atropos. Elapsed time, 30 minutes since last crash. Whole areas of this forest are rearranging themselves like a fluid puzzle after each of my... Whenever I return, per Astra protocol, I will not be recovered until I reach the broadcast signal. If you're hearing this, you are stuck here too.
Eventually, either by one of the hostile inhabitants of this world or, more likely by inadvertently falling off a cliff, Celine will run out of health and die. Instead of simply restarting from a checkpoint, she'll instead wake up back at the crash site and remember everything that just happened. She's not just trapped on this world, she's trapped in a loop so that every time she dies, she'll wake back up right where she started with the memories of everything she's experienced so far, including death, fresh in her mind. Even with this discovery, it doesn't change the fact that she's trapped, so she does the only thing she can do, keeps exploring the planet in search of a way out. As she makes her way deeper into this world, she'll come across things that help clear up where she is and what exactly happened here. Fragments of an alien language in the form of xenoglyphs will allow her to translate messages scattered throughout the world, and tableaus made of pure light will form as she approaches, allowing her to piece together the story of Atropos. Then there's the house. Celine clearly recognises the building and is almost more scared and disgusted of its presence than any of the horrors she's seen so far. Eventually she finds a key, and upon entering, it becomes clear why. This isn't just any house, it's Celine's home just as she left it back on Earth. Upstairs, she can't bring herself to open one of the doors before looking out the window to see an Apollo-era astronaut looking back at her before disappearing into thin air. She collapses, and when she comes to, is outside. In the astronaut's place, there's a toy that looks just like it. It won't let you go. Beyond the house, she continues her search for a way out and finds the only way forwards is through a teleporter. With no other options, she steps through and finds herself in a desert wasteland. Stepping outside, her next destination is obvious. A towering mountain lies in the distance, and with no other leads, she makes her way towards it and begins to climb. The further and the higher she travels, the more challenging the enemies she faces, and at the very peak of the mountain she finds another teleporter and enters it to find herself in the derelict citadel. This area has the most signs of the previous civilization of anywhere she's seen so far, with huge structures, statues of the previous inhabitants, and the shambling remains of their automaton servants. At the centre of the citadel lies the tower, the source of the white shadow signal. At the base there's another collection of tableaus, telling more of the story of Atropos. The final image, however, shows the tower, and at its peak, the astronaut.
That's the astronaut. High above everything. Destroying everything. It wants something. Stalking me. Or guiding me.
It makes no sense, but regardless, she climbs higher and higher until she finally reaches the top. There she comes face to face with the last inhabitant of the tower, slumped on a throne in front of her, and a clear path to White Shadow.
Receive my signal. Then that's it. White Shadow. You were how I escape.
After sending out the signal, she's picked up by Astra and returns to Earth. She goes back home, seemingly falls in love and grows old until her time finally comes, not at the hands of a gigantic monster or an infinite fall, but naturally and peacefully. Where Returnal sees Celine trapped on an alien world, Silent Hill 2 sees its protagonist go somewhere a lot more human. The game opens with James Sunderland receiving a letter from his wife Mary. In it, she tells him she's in Silent Hill at their special place, waiting for him, and it all seems very normal. The only problem is Mary's dead, and she has been for 3 years now, so how could she have possibly sent a letter or been in the town? James knows this himself, and even states how ridiculous it is that he's come all of this way, and yet he can't help himself from going into town to check. Just as Celine knew she shouldn't investigate the White Shadow signal but couldn't help herself, James heads down into Silent Hill in search of his wife, who he knows to be dead. Pretty much as soon as he descends into the valley, he can tell things are very, very wrong with the area. For starters, everything is covered in a thick fog that makes seeing more than a few meters in any direction impossible. The area is also nearly completely abandoned, save for a lady he meets in a graveyard, who reaffirms that yes, things are very wrong in Silent Hill.
I think you should stay away. This town, there's something wrong with it. And it's not just the fog either.
One of the most disturbing discoveries for me was the huge scaffolding structures blocking certain streets of the town. Something about them and the dirty white sheets covering them just feels wrong, and they're placed in such a way that James is forced down a very specific path through the area. Eventually, he's corralled into an apartment building, and from here he too must descend and explore the area, until he's able to enter through a locked door and come face to face with his tormentor. Stepping through the red door, he finds himself in the exact same room, but a totally different world. Heading out into the hallway, he finds everything to be decayed with rusted metal and rot covering every surface. Just as he ascended, he must now descend, fighting his way through monsters and wading into the filth to unlock the path forward. Once he makes his way back onto the streets of Silent Hill, the other world disappears behind him. He then makes his way to what he believes to be their special place on the pier. As he closes the distance, he sees a woman there waiting for him, but instead of Mary, it's a woman who looks and sounds a whole lot like her, called Maria. Despite looking so similar, Maria is a lot more brash and flirtatious than Mary. She makes constant comments and passes at James which, to his credit, he wholeheartedly ignores. She also suggests another location that could be their special place, and with no other ideas, they head out together to find it. En route, they pass through a strip club, where the two discuss the situation, James outright asking if she thinks he's crazy for following a letter from someone he knows to be dead.
Am I crazy? You know, for thinking she could be here.
Crazy is one word for it, I guess. I can think of another.
What's that?
Hopeful.
After leaving, they make their way to the potential special place, but Mary is nowhere to be found. Moving on, they come to an abandoned hospital and the cycle begins again. They must ascend all the way to the rooftop before being thrown back down to do it all over again in the world of decay. Whilst making their final escape, James and Maria are separated, and he watches as she's skewered by Pyramid Head and lost into the darkness. After Celine's death on Earth, we watch as she's buried, and as she's being lowered into the ground, a boy steps forward as she plunges deeper and deeper until...
No, I can't be here. I escaped. I was... Helios, you're still here too.
It's quite honestly one of the cruelest twists I've ever seen a game pull, and her emotions match the player. You both went through hell, dying over and over again, and finally managed to make it to the top and escape, only to be sent right back to that same hell all over again. Well, not quite the same. Helios is now decayed and covered in rust, and the surrounding area is overgrown. Exploring your surroundings again reveals that the same overgrowth has taken over the entire area, and the same 5 notes can be heard ringing throughout over and over again.
This is the song I was always playing.
The reminders of home continue, with the house being right where you left it, though similarly decayed. Upon entering it, rather than seeing things from Celine's perspective, you instead zoom out to show a child playing the game on a PS5. As Celine rings the doorbell, the bell rings for the child and he gets up to answer it. As he exits the room, the name on the door reads Helios, the same door Celine couldn't bring herself to open all those years ago. He goes downstairs to find the astronaut sitting at the kitchen table before telling it a story. It disappears when he looks away, so he runs off to find it. In Celine's room, he picks up his toy octopus before the astronaut appears.
Look. 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 It's Octo.
Guess maybe it's more of a shark person, and honestly, who can blame it? This sequence really gives us more questions than answers, but one thing we can safely assume from context is that the child is called Helios and is almost certainly Celine's son. Regardless, she has to continue. Eventually, she comes to another teleporter, and stepping through, she's at the same coordinates as the desert, but it's instead a frozen hellscape. Now, instead of climbing up the mountain, she descends beneath it, first under the ground and then diving under the water. She keeps going further and further, deeper and deeper, until she finally reaches the bottom. Here, you'll find a car sitting on the ocean floor. Moving forward, you'll come face to face with what appears to be the core of the planet and a Lovecraftian beast that shows Celine one more vision. Suddenly, everything becomes a whole lot clearer. The song that was playing, that she repeated over and over on Earth, Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult, plays on the radio. The astronaut that's been haunting her since she arrived. She couldn't save Helios, her lasting memory of the moon being that white shadow on the water's surface. At this point, it's unclear if she escaped or if she never made it out of that wreck, but it doesn't really matter. Her grief over the loss of her son is what has kept her trapped.
I birthed destruction. I am destruction.
After another walk through the house, Selene will instead wake up and watch as Helios crash lands on the planet's surface, an anti-aircraft gun still glowing beside her. No matter what way you look at any of this, Selene is to blame for everything. She's the reason Helios crashed, trapping herself on the planet. She sent the white shadow signal. She chose to respond to it. She swerved to avoid the astronaut. And she failed to save Helios. Now alone again, James eventually makes his way to the Historical Society. Within it, he finds a staircase that just keeps going down and down, deeper than should be possible, and yet it just keeps going. When he finally reaches the bottom, all he finds is a hole in the ground, and with no bottom in sight, he jumps even deeper. Again and again he jumps, going deeper and deeper, eventually finding himself face to face with Maria locked in a cell. But when he finally gets to her, it's clear she's been dead for a while. Leaving her behind again, he comes to an open grave with his name on the tombstone and jumps even deeper into the darkness. When he reaches the bottom, he steps through a door to find himself outside on the shore of the lake, and with no other options, begins to row across it. At the other side, he finds the Lakeview Hotel, where he once stayed with Mary many years ago. Once inside, he makes his way to their room, where he plays a tape of their last moments of bliss together before the disease took hold.
I don't know why, but I just love it here. It's so peaceful. You know what I heard? This whole area used to be a sacred place. I think I can see why. It's too bad we have to leave. Promise you'll take me again, James.
The reveal hits James like a meteorite. He's known this all along, but buried the truth so deep inside of him that even he believed she simply died from the disease. Now faced with his guilt, it all becomes clear why he's here. From the very first minute, Selene has been the one to blame for everything. It wasn't his grief that brought him to Silent Hill, but her guilt. Guilt he pretended was only grief, and the hell created in the process. Now we know why Selene is here, we can try to work out where exactly here is. We've already talked about the presence of the house, the astronaut, and Selene herself being the reason for Helios' death, but another trip through the house can tell us a little bit more. This time when she wakes up, she's sitting in the middle of 3 chairs, the 2 flanking her, both filled by long dead alien beings. To explain the significance of this, I need to talk a little bit about ancient Greek mythology. There's references to Greece and Greek mythology all over Eternal. The part that I want to focus on in this video is the name of the planet, Atropos. Should have written that down. Atropos. This is also the name of one of the Moirai, or the Fates, and together they control the destiny of all living things. The other 2, Clotho and Lachesis, however, it's a tough word, okay, I'm not ancient Greek, I don't know. They controlled the birth and the length of life, leaving Atropos the job of ending the life and deciding the final fate. Later in the game, during another vision, you'll see artwork of the 3 Fates, and Atropos is always placed in the middle, just like Selene is in the middle of the 2 aliens. This tells us that Selene is Atropos. This planet is entirely made up by her, whether that's an extended hallucination as she drowned at the bottom of the river with Helios, a fate she brought on herself whenever she died later, or something else entirely. This planet is her own personal hell, and one that is entirely created by her. With this in mind, everything starts to make a lot more sense. Helios, the ship being named after Helios, her son, and both of them crashing and being trapped on the bottom. The house and the astronaut being constant reminders of her guilt and everything she destroyed. Just like Selene, James has to have known that he killed Mary all along, but he buried that so deeply inside of himself that when he received a letter from her saying she's waiting in Silent Hill, he had no choice but to go to keep up the lie. It's almost like by going, he thought if he found her, it would mean undoing what he did. However, where Selene is responsible for the existence, if you could call it that, of Atropos, Silent Hill is a little bit different. The town is absolutely a real place, and it was once even normal. However, at some point it became a hell on earth, and a siren song for those who carry guilt and a desire for suffering. Once you arrive at the town, it shows you exactly what you want to see and grants you that desire in spades, crafting a hell made especially for you. As soon as James enters the town, everything that causes him pain is in some way a reminder of what he did. The monsters with the deformed torsos almost resemble a person being smothered. The nurses are from the hospital where Mary spent the last months of her life. Then there's of course Mary herself, who transforms into a bedbound monster, just as James viewed her in her final days. Pyramid Head, however, is a little bit more complicated. Exploring the town, you'll find imagery depicting executioners from the town's past, and they bear somewhat of a resemblance. Pyramid Head represents James's desire to punish himself, and the town's willingness to accommodate that by giving him an executioner all his own. Maria is yet another of the town's creations made especially for James. She looks and sounds exactly the same as Mary, but is the version he was craving when she was dying in the hospital. She dresses more provocatively and she flirts with him constantly, making him feel desired, and as much as he tries to reject it and focus on Mary, he can't help but hesitate each time she makes a pass. She acts as a reminder of his selfishness and that he couldn't do anything to stop Mary's death, even if he didn't take matters into his own hands. Even the locations he visits during his stay are full of constant reminders of Mary. The apartment building has a mannequin dressed just like her with a monster hiding behind it, ready to jump out as soon as you take a closer look. The hospital is obvious, since it's exactly where Mary and likely James spent a huge amount of time towards the end. The Lakeview Hotel is where they spent their last moments of bliss before everything fell apart. He is propelled through his memories and forced to confront them one terrifying reminder at a time. Towards the end of the game, we hear Mary speaking to James during what is almost certainly one of their last conversations before he killed her, and she just screams insults at him.
What do you want, James? Flowers? I don't want any damn flowers. Just go home already. Look at me. I'm disgusting. Between the disease and the drugs, I look like a monster. Well, what are you looking at? Get the hell out of here. Leave me alone already.
This verbal abuse was likely going on for a while before the end, and whilst it doesn't forgive his actions, you can understand a little bit more about why he did what he did. The Otherworld dials everything up to 11 and thinks subtext is for cowards. The entire world transforms into a world of death, decay, and darkness. Rot and rust permeates everything in sight, mirroring Mary's body as the disease ravaged through it. By forcing James to go through it, it's almost as if the town is giving him a taste of what she went through. The entire planet of Atropos has been created for the sole purpose of making Selene suffer. Every single creature and automaton and hazard has been manifested from her desire to punish herself for her actions. Whilst most of the inhabitants of this world seem like your average alien monsters, there are a couple which hold a little more significance. Hyperion, the boss of the Echoing Ruins, is the source of the music you hear as you explore the area. Once you reach the top of the spire, you come face to face with him, and over the course of the battle, he'll switch between fighting you himself and playing a huge organ that dishes out even more suffering. This comes both in the form of more projectiles than you can shake a dodge button at, and those same notes from Don't Fear the Reaper over and over again. When he's finally defeated and the last echoes of the song ring out into silence, it's perhaps the closest Selene gets to breaking entirely.
Finally. Silence. It was too much. Too much.
Ophion, the final boss of the game, is perhaps the closest we get to Selene being shown to be fighting herself. At the start of the battle it has an alien visage, but once you cross into stage 2, it changes into that of a human skull. And finally at stage 3, it becomes an astronaut's helmet, and if you look very closely, you can see it's a woman's face inside. At every turn, she's being tortured by the crash and constant reminders of her actions and everything she destroyed in the process. With her guilt firmly in hand, Celine can continue to explore the planet, and eventually, through many more cycles of exploration and death, she will be shown one final vision and be given one last helping of blame. She feels she's to blame for everything, no matter how she tries to look at it. She was the astronaut that caused her to crash. It doesn't matter if she was the driver, the astronaut, or both. She blames herself for her son's death, and that is the entire reason she's trapped. We've talked about everything the town showed James, but he's not the only current resident of Silent Hill. Over the course of the game, he'll meet a couple of others going through their own bespoke versions of hell. We have Eddie, who he initially meets in the apartment building and a few times later, and he says something very interesting during their final interaction.
This town called you too. You and me are the same. We're not like other people, don't you know that?
This town called to both of them. Eddie was relentlessly bullied all of his life, which he talks about near constantly. Eventually, he snapped and shot his bully's dog, and the bully himself before fleeing and finding himself arriving at Silent Hill. His guilt, combined with his self-hatred, brought him to this town, and in it, he found a hell made just for him. From their first meeting, we get some insight into what exactly the town looks like for Eddie.
Look, my name is James. James Sunderland.
Eddie.
Eddie, okay. So, do you live here, Eddie?
No. I'm not even from this town. It's just...
Something brought you here.
Yeah, you could say that. Well, they came at me. I didn't know what to do, so I ran. I came here. Figured it might be safe, but then I found the guy in the fridge.
Easy, deep breaths. Look, this place, it's not safe. These things, this whole town, there's something wrong with it.
The man in the kitchen is likely the body of his bully, and when we find him later, we'll see that same corpse over and over again, along with Eddie, swearing that he didn't kill him. Just as James is seeing all these reminders of Mary in the form of monsters, Eddie is haunted by the one he hurt just the same. If you look closely, you can also see that Eddie's breath is coming out as fog, despite James's being normal. This doesn't make much sense early on, but eventually, when the two fight, it takes place in a freezer. We can assume from this that his Silent Hill is a frozen wasteland, likely as some reminder of his past. He's also always found with a lot of food nearby, and all of it looks disgusting. His biggest insecurity and the source of both his self-hatred and the attention of his bullies, at least in his mind, is his weight. He's followed by constant reminders of this, just as James has Maria and the thigh monsters. You'll also meet Angela. In fact, she's the first person James talks to on his way into town, and her story and reason for being here is a little bit more complicated and difficult to talk about. This is the part of the video where I have to talk about sexual abuse, so if you'd like to skip that, go to this timecode to avoid it. I completely understand. What we see of her hell is a more traditional world on fire, as you see during their last interaction at the Lakeview Hotel. On the walls to either side of her are the bodies of two men, mutilated and stitched into bed frames. Angela was abused and assaulted by her father and brother, all the while her mother blamed her for everything and insisted she deserved it. Eventually, Angela snapped and murdered both her father and brother before fleeing and being called to Silent Hill. Just like James is searching for Mary, Angela is there searching for her mother, and whether that's to finish the job of killing her abusers or looking for a final source of comfort, it doesn't matter. Just like James, she'll never find what she's looking for. During that final interaction, she initially confuses James with her mother.
Mama, I was looking for you. You're the only one left. Maybe then I can finally rest. Mama. What's wrong? You're not my mama. It's you.
We can gather from this that Angela has been seeing her mother everywhere, in everyone. You find her earlier in the game crying in the park by a statue of a female, who in all likelihood she saw in the form of her mother. The monsters she sees are almost certainly taking the form of her father and brother, just like the corpses in the flaming staircase. You even fight one of these monsters in a section of the labyrinth. He has the appearance of someone under the covers of a bed, writhing around. We can assume what this symbolises, but also remember that we're playing as James, so this is just how he sees it. Who knows what exactly Angela, and for that matter Eddie, are looking at, but we can safely assume it's not any better. Every time you meet Angela, she's surrounded by reminders of death, her own self-hatred, and a desire to end her own life. In the graveyard, she says she's searching for her family. Obviously, her father and brother are dead, but by looking in the graveyard, it's almost like she wants to crawl into the grave and die with them. In the Blue Creek apartments, you find her in a room with a giant mirror, contemplating taking her own life. Everywhere she looks in there, she sees and hates herself, wants to suffer, as it's what she believes she deserves. And then in the labyrinth, she's literally being chased around an area that is initially reminiscent of what is very likely the house that she was abused in, before it transforms into a mess of flesh and machinery. The walls literally breathe in and out as the machine cycles endlessly. She's trapped inside the memory of her abuse, and even when she's set free by James killing the monster, she just thinks he's doing it so he can ask for something in return.
It's okay. It's over.
Don't even try.
Try what?
Like you don't know. I see what you're doing. It's always the same with you. You're only after one thing.
Angela, please.
You don't have to lie. Go ahead. Say it.
All three of the people we see trapped in Silent Hill have been through pain that would break anyone, and as a result have committed what they deem to be unforgivable acts. They are all conflicted characters with both guilt and justification for their actions, and Silent Hill calls to all of them to satisfy that desire for punishment. Their perceived guilt, her guilt, has given them a desire to punish herself, and as long as they hold on to both, she'll never be free. The time loop in Returnal serves a dual purpose, both as a gameplay mechanic and a plot device. Celine is aware that she's trapped in the loop and yet can't do anything to escape it, and as such it becomes part of the torture, and this particular type of time loop has no shortage of that. Since she seemingly gets a new body at the start of every loop, her old corpses are strewn about the world as a constant reminder of what awaits her no matter what she does. Even in death, she will always be trapped here, and she has to be reminded of that constantly. The fact that she can find upgrades to her suit and weaponry whilst exploring the world gives her somewhat of an illusion of progress. Comparing her late game runs through the world to her first, she's much more efficient in her exploration. She can use a grappling hook to fly around the area at high speed or dive below the water's surface to get to areas previously out of reach. Over the course of the game, she almost masters her own personal hell, and yet no matter how good she gets at exploring it and defeating its enemies, she will never escape it. It's almost more cruel than having no progress at all. The first time she escapes, only to come back 60 years later, it tells her no matter how far she goes or what she does, she will never truly be free, and the moment she lets go, she'll be dragged straight back to hell. Pretty early in the game, she loses all concept of how long she's been trapped. From the first moments we see her crash, you can already find bodies and scout logs recorded by her that she doesn't remember making. She doesn't know if this is the first time or the 1000th time, and her mind is just broken from the process and reset to a point of relative comfort. Since her personal hell is so outside of reality, she doesn't even know if time works as it should. She shot herself down, so are there multiple Celines all running around Atropos at the same time and the shifting landscape keeps them separated? Is it just that time here is more of a flat circle and she can look across to see herself? If she created this place, then she really has been here since the beginning, no matter what, if that was an hour ago or 1,000 years. She has no idea if the universe outside of herself still exists. She is trapped in eternal suffering with no awareness of anything else. That one moment of the crash has trapped her so thoroughly that nothing she does can ever let her get past it. The time loop theory for Silent Hill has been around for decades at this point, and if we're to accept it as true, which I believe we are, then the loop in town works very differently to the one in Returnal. The world for those inside of the loop remains the same, but for everyone else, life goes on. We know this from the fact that James, Angela, and Eddie are all there at the same time. In my opinion, it would be far too convenient to assume that they all arrived in town on the same day, and instead it's much more plausible that they instead each came to Silent Hill on their own and just joined the loop, slotting in right alongside the others. This is a small touch, but notice how over the course of the game, we never go beyond the reach of Silent Hill. When we join James, he's in the bathroom overlooking the town, splashing his face with cold water, something you might do after a bad dream to bring yourself back to reality. He's already in the town's area of influence because the loop has to start where he's already under the effects. The town also has this eerie timelessness quality. Lots of the technology appears quite old-fashioned, like the jukebox, the radio, and the VHS, but none of the three are dressed from any particular era. You could tell me they're from basically any time in the last 50 years, and I wouldn't be able to argue all that much. However, the main difference between the two is awareness. James and the others trapped in the town aren't fully aware they're trapped in a loop, at least not at the start. James isn't fully aware that he's killed his wife until he's shown it happening, and when you meet both Angela and Eddie, they're both a lot more scared and a lot less resigned than they are towards the end. The closer each of the three of them get to the end of their loops, the more aware they seem to become. After James watches the tape, he gets up to find the hotel has decayed around him, likely what it really looks like after so many years abandoned. He's seeing through the illusion for the first time, just before the end. He walks past monsters you've been fighting for the entire game, and they shamble around, exhausted, like performers who've spent all their energy putting on a show and are finally taking a moment to rest before the next scene. As Angela wanders up the stairs, resigned to her fate, she never once seems to feel any pain or acknowledge the world in flames around her, almost as if she's grown numb to it after so many repetitions. Eddie finally admits his sins and runs into the freezer, taunting and almost encouraging James to kill him, as he knows this is how it has to end. His mind almost breaks before this, but he regains his focus the moment James hits him, like it jolts him back to his place in the script. This ignorance is a blessing and a curse for each of the residents. Sure, they may not know that they're trapped in an eternal loop, but does that really make things any better? Every single time things reset, they're sent right back to the start with no knowledge of what's waiting for them. Each and every horror they go through for the first time every time. It's no secret that playing Silent Hill 2 or any horror game is far less scary the second time when you know what's coming and where, but these three have no idea, so are wandering into the dark each and every time they reach a new loop. They face the horror made just for them. They're shown constant reminders of their sins and relive the worst moments of their lives over and over again. Between the two options here, I really can't choose which is worse. Sure, Celine is aware of her situation to an extent, and she knows she'll never escape, but she's doomed to keep exploring and dying over and over again, aware the whole time that she has no hope of escape. Eventually, she'll learn everything there is to know about Atropos, but that doesn't get her any closer to escaping it. Inversely, the residents of Silent Hill don't know they're trapped in a loop, so are wandering into hell for the first time every time. They'll also never escape, but at least they don't have to live with that knowledge. Both of these hells are created just for their residents, and both are full of constant reminders of their past wrongs, meaning the eternity trapped is in constant suffering. Both of these hells are also excellent analogies of real-life grief and how it can paralyze you. Returnal shows how grief can cause a person to become trapped by pain, unable to move on as the world passes them by. Silent Hill is more about literally being trapped in a moment of pain and reliving it over and over again forever. Your world comes to a standstill, as all you can do is torture yourself, relive the pain forever. Both show extremely different approaches to creating eternal suffering, but both come down to the same final message. If you can't take responsibility and accept what you have done, you'll be consumed with grief and guilt and be trapped in eternal suffering. If you cannot move on, then it doesn't matter if you're on an alien world that may or may not exist or a sleepy town in Maine. You'll never be free to live and will be trapped forever in a hell of your own creation. Hello again. I know the videos normally end with some sort of positive twist on the topic, but I just felt this one felt a lot more impactful by ending with that dark note. But let me know if you miss it, and I can definitely bring it back in future. In fact, I did write an entire positive twist for this, but I just decided not to use it because I felt it worked better. Let me know. This video also originally had a companion video all about Greek mythology and how it links to these two games. Obviously, Returnal a lot more than Silent Hill 2. But in the end, I scrapped it. And the main reason was because I didn't want to push this video back any further, because this video was basically done. So I wanted to make sure I could get it out to you as soon as possible. To be blunt, if there was a bunch of supporters and they were all, supporting the channel and they were waiting for that companion video, then of course I'd prioritize and make sure that it gets put out. But while we're small and growing and there's not as many or not any supporters, which is just fine, you don't need to, only if you want to, I want to prioritize the videos that everyone can see coming out regularly rather than, delaying each video just so I can make a second video that at this point no one is able to watch. Again, only support the channel if you really feel like it's something that you want to do. Do not feel any pressure. As I said, it's something that you want to do, and when we get a couple more members, I will make sure that those companion videos are coming out as regularly as I possibly can. Anyway, enough yapping. That is all I have for you today. So I want to thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. Like this video if you did. Love yourself no matter what. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.